Nothing beats love. But after love, if you ask people, when have you been the most happy? When I had a really, really good idea, or when one of my ideas came true. It's way up there. So yeah, I like to say it's when we are the most human is when we are creative.
Hey friends, welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast. I'm Whitney Putnam and I'm really glad you're here today. Let me ask you something and I hope you answer honestly, okay? Have you ever been asked to come up with a solution and find yourself just staring at a blank page thinking, I have literally no idea what to do right now? Or maybe you've thought, I'm just not a creative person. Or maybe you're the person that thinks, I'm already creative. Do I really need to come up with this? If any of that sounds familiar, you're in very good company. Because here's the truth. Most of us don't struggle with creativity. Today's guest will tell us that to be creative is to be human. Instead, we struggle with where ideas actually come from. We struggle with ideating from nothing, with feeling pressure to be original, or wondering if creativity is something you either have or you don't. Today's conversation is for both kinds of leaders, the ones who feel blocked and the ones who feel confident but curious. Before we dive in, quick favor. If you're watching on YouTube and you care about becoming a more effective, healthy, whole leader, which I know you do, go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on notifications. That way you won't miss future conversations that stretch and strengthen your leadership. All right. Let's get into it. Today, you're going to hear from author, speaker, and creativity explorer, Fredrik Heron. Fredrik has spent decades helping leaders understand that creativity isn't about talent or personality. It's about practice, environment, and perspective. Our president and CEO, David Ashcraft, sat down with Fredrik to talk about his new book, The World of Creativity. And together they unpack what it really means to lead creatively, especially when the ideas don't come easily. This conversation is practical, refreshing, and honestly, it's a relief. Let's listen in.
Hey, well, I want to welcome to the GLM podcast, Fredrik Heron. And Fredrik, it's great having you with us. Just for those of you that may not know Fredrik, he's an author, a speaker, known for just focusing on creativity and change. You're author of a book that was actually named one of the 100 best business books of all time, which is very impressive. And you've been a summit speaker in the past as well. So welcome. Thank you for taking time with us today.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And Fredrik, you are right now, it's always fun to know where somebody is speaking from. So you are in Sweden right now.
Yes, I live on a little island outside Stockholm and winter has arrived.
And so does that mean the water freezes around you, or does it ice up, or does it stay flowing?
Well, it can actually freeze and then we're stuck on the island, but it normally doesn't.
Okay. All right. Very good. So Fredrik, you're from Sweden. You haven't always lived there. You've traveled a lot. And I'm curious as to just a little bit of your background. How does one become an expert on creativity? And, when you were young, when you were in school, did you think, oh, this is an area I want to be an expert in? Or how did all that evolve? So give us some of your background and how you even got to this point.
Yeah, well, okay. So I actually grew up in a family where my father was he was a teacher and a musician, and he was extremely creative. He could play like 10 different instruments, from the drums to the flute and everything in between. So I grew up understanding that creativity was important, but unfortunately I totally lack any sense of musicality. Like my brother has perfect pitch, but I don't. So when I was growing up, I realized creativity is important, but apparently it's very important, but I don't know how to do it. Because to me, creativity was the same as being able to play an instrument. And it took me many, many years. Actually, when I was in the university, when I realized my own creative superpower, so to speak, and then I realized that I can be creative in the ways that suits me. And that's actually when I decided that, okay, I'm going to study this concept of human creativity, because there's so many different aspects of creativity.
Interesting. So it's interesting, Fredrik, you talk about your brother being somewhat an artist and your dad a musician. And so oftentimes we tend to think of creativity coming in the area of the arts. And so my interest is knowing, how many people do you really think truly are creative? Do we all have the capacity to be creative? Is it limited to just the artist?
I've been teaching creativity for 25 plus years, so clearly I think it can be taught. But I think everyone is creative in a different way. And there's so many different ways that we can express our own creativity. But more importantly, I think everyone can become much more creative. Even the super creative can be. I like to say that people often come to me and say, Fredrik, like journalists, Fredrik, don't you feel sad about the uncreative people? And I say, no, I don't. I feel sad about the super creative people who are not trying even harder to become even more creative. Like, I wouldn't feel bad about a short basketball player, but I feel bad about a tall basketball player who has talent and it doesn't fully utilize that talent. That to me is more depressing.
Yeah,
and a lot
good.
of people also ask me the question, so can creativity be measured? How do I compare my creativity? How do I know how creative I am? And I like to say, this, if anything, is not a competition. We should not compare our creativity to someone else's creativity. And we should only ask ourselves this question: am I more creative today than I was yesterday? That's the only measurement that matters.
That's good. So in looking at some of your previous work, Fredrik, I like your definition of creativity, and I'd love to have you expound on it. What I think you said is you take two objects or two things or concepts that are known objects or concepts, you combine them together and create something brand new. Is that somewhat the way you define creativity?
Yeah, that's one of the ways I define creativity. But I've recently started to define it more from a philosophical point of view. If you ask me now to define creativity, I will answer, it is what makes us human. That's my answer. Because creativity can be so many different things. So I don't like to make it into a simple definition. When I say it's what makes us human, I mean first of all from the perspective that we are by far the most creative animal. So what makes us different from other animals is that we are way more creative than they are. They can also be creative, but we are way more creative. And also because we never feel more alive and more, human than when we have a really, really good idea. I mean, apart from love, when we are in love, that's, nothing beats love. But after love, if you ask people, when have you been the most happy? When I had a really, really good idea, or when one of my ideas came true. It's way up there. So yeah, I like to say it's when we are the most human is when we are creative.
Well, what's fun about you saying that, Fredrik, and even we are happiest when we come up with a creative idea, if I'm not comparing myself to others, if I'm not trying to compare myself to you, then I can come up with an idea that I think is very creative. It may not be to you, but for me it is, and I can be incredibly joyous just in that moment that I think I came up with something creative. So yeah, that's fun.
Exactly. And creativity, of course, is solving problems, making the world better. But actually, when you think of it, that's just side effects. The fact that we are so happy while we are making the world better. So just sometimes we can just create something, and it doesn't matter what we create. It's just the process of creating makes us happy.
So part of what I liked about your old definition, so I'm going to have to get my head around this new definition. Part of what I liked about the old definition of taking two things that are known and putting them together and creating something new, where that helped me, Fredrik, was I have a hard time sitting down and looking at a blank sheet of paper and just creating something. I feel like I have no capacity to do that, but I can take two other things. Gives me a starting point and something to work off of. And so, Fredrik, as we talk about creativity and realizing we're talking to leaders, many leaders may be church leaders, but we've got lots of business leaders as well. Why do we even need to be talking about creativity in an organizational setting?
Well, why do we need to talk about it right now? I've been studying this concept for 25 years, and it's never been more important than now because of the speed of change, right? Suddenly we can do things that, there's so many new technologies coming and they are changing so fast. And to understand how we can use new technology, we can't use knowledge for that. We have to use creativity and imagination because we've never had these tools before. So it is fundamental in whatever industry or business you're in. It is fundamental to understand new technologies, new concepts, new ideas, and to understand how we best can use them. I think AI is a great example now because most people are still desperately trying to figure out how to use it. But the people who do figure that out has a huge advantage.
Yeah. So, Fredrik, then, as a business leader, as an employer, why do I need to give my people time, or how do I go about helping them become more creative? What's the value proposition for me as a leader to be exhorting our staff, our team to be more creative in what they're doing?
Well, the value is simple. It is basically a shortcut. We achieve the same thing with less resources, or we achieve more with the same resources. We also get people more motivated and more inspired if they are allowed to be creative. So there's a lot of advantage. How do we do it? We inspire our people to want to be more creative. Everyone loves to be creative, but most people don't know how to do it. They are a bit afraid. They are a bit uncertain how to do it, and they need guidance and inspiration, and they look up to leaders for that.
So describe that a little bit more, because I think I've heard you say there's not a formula. It's not let's follow these 3 steps and therefore I'll become creative. So I think I've even heard you go so far as to say I can't even necessarily teach creativity, but I've got inspired in others. Is that something you've said? Or
well, yes, I do say that. I've interviewed thousands and thousands, multiple thousands of creative people. And creative people, they don't do creativity exercises. Right?
Okay.
And a lot of creativity books is just do this exercise. And creative people don't do creativity exercises, but they make sure they are inspired. So inspiration is what triggers creativity, curiosity and inspiration. So if you want people to be more creative, you should make sure that they are more inspired and that they are more curious. Those are the 2 triggers for creativity.
So how can you give examples of, or places where you've seen leaders inspire their people to be more creative? How do I go about it as a leader?
Well, okay, I'll give you one example. I did a speech in Singapore for a large media organization, and they had an innovation day. So everyone was there, like 300 people were there, and the CEO was speaking, and then I was going to speak. And the CEO goes up and he reads from a piece of paper. It goes like this: "We are gathered here today to champion and celebrate creativity and innovation." And he's just reading from a piece of paper. And you could tell, he didn't write this himself. He's just reading what someone gave to him. And the energy of the room just dies down. It's like, everyone's like, oh, this is just corporate BS. But then suddenly he looks up from the piece of paper and he says, "What am I doing? I'm just reading a piece of paper. Clearly, I didn't write it myself." And he crumbles it, throws it away. And I could tell it was not rehearsed because I was sitting next to the person who wrote the speech, and she went, "Ah!" But he improvised, and he said he threw the paper away, and he said, "You know what? This is not working. Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story from the first job I ever had at Singapore airport, and the leader, my first boss, who taught me the value." And then he started telling a story. And you could just feel the energy in the room change, because suddenly here was a guy improvising, right, in an important situation. And now he's giving permission to his employees that if you need to improvise, you can improvise too.
So do you feel like, Fredrik, by him doing that, obviously you're giving permission for other people to improvise. Do you have to at some point stop and say, okay, look, people, I just improvised. Well, you need to do that as well? Or
no,
just over
you don't
time?
have to say it. No, you don't have to say it.
Over time, they pick it up.
No, they will. People are smart. They'll pick it up. But what you can do is you can make sure that these stories get told. I'm from Sweden, and in Sweden we have IKEA, or like you like to say, IKEA. And the founder was very creative. But what the company did was they made sure those stories about Ingvar Kamprad got told throughout the organization about how he did that. Or not only him, anyone. So to spread stories of people doing creative things is very effective.
Yeah, that's good. So I know you've traveled a lot. You're in Sweden now, but you've done a lot of traveling around the world, and even in your most recent book, talked about things that you learned about creativity around the world. And one of the things that I enjoyed and was fascinated by, Fredrik, was I've been to many of the places that you describe in the book. And so it's just real fun to read and see what you picked up, the nuggets from each different place, and go, oh, okay, I can see that. So describe your new book a little bit, and how did you even get to this process of saying, I'm going to travel the world and learn more about creativity by traveling the world?
Yeah, so the book is called The World of Creativity, 37 chapters, about 37 insights about creativity from 37 different countries. I've been studying creativity in 75 countries, and I go to between 15 and 30 countries every year. So I interview thousands of people, all industries, all countries, everywhere. And I do it not just the normal heads of innovation at CEOs, but also people who are never interviewed about creativity. There's a chapter about North Korea in there. What can we learn about creativity from the North Koreans? What can we learn about creativity from the nomads of Mongolia? The unexpected people. I want to understand human creativity. And then I want to understand different aspects. How do they look at creativity? Like I went to Bhutan. What can we learn about creativity from Buddhist people in Bhutan? And there's a purpose with this. Someone called the book the Anthony Bourdain of creativity, which I think is really beautiful, because Anthony Bourdain wanted to understand humanity through food. I want to understand humanity through creativity.
And when you talk about creativity, is that the same thing as innovation? Even as this kind of a side note here, so I'm taking us a little bit different direction, but is it the same thing as innovation?
No, creativity is the whole process.
Okay.
Innovation is the aspect of making ideas come true. So,
Okay.
But creativity is from even before we have a problem, all the way until we celebrate the success. Innovation means from the idea of when we decide to make an idea happen. So innovation is part of the creative process.
It's a part of the creative process.
Creativity is much bigger than this.
Okay, interesting. So I just literally came back 2 nights ago from Iceland and spending time in Iceland. And so you talk in your book about Iceland and what you learned there. And I love what you learned, and even using, and part of what you do all the way through the book is you'll use phrases from each of these different countries. But what you learned in Iceland was, if I remember right, and you can say it better, is visiting countries and not learning from others, and how stupid that is. Or I think the word in Iceland is more being an idiot. Is that right?
Yeah, the word is heimsker. Heimsker it's an old Viking word, and if you were a Viking back in the days, 1,000 years ago, you were supposed to build a ship, sail south to the south of Europe or to Europe, and you're supposed to steal as much as you could, like weapons and gold and whatever. But more importantly, you're supposed to steal ideas. And ideas that how do they farm in Denmark? How do they make weapons in Germany? And then you go back and you apply that on your farm. If you did not do that, you were a heimsker. And heimsker means moron or stupid person. And the word heimsker is made up from the word heim, which means home, meaning basically someone who never travels, someone who never leaves their home is bound to become less smart because we're not picking up ideas from the rest of the world. Which I think is a beautiful concept. I was actually in Iceland a couple of weeks ago, and I learned a new Icelandic word, which is
did you really?
Beautiful. The Icelandic word for curious. It is forvitten. For means before, but vitten means to know. So in Icelandic, curious means that which comes before knowing. And I think it's brilliant, because to know anything, you first have to be curious about it.
Yeah.
And also that means, that's why I said curiosity is one of the pillars for creativity. If you can get your people to become more curious of whatever new technology or whatever is out there, or your customers something, they will learn more things that then they can then apply on what they do.
So for me, Fredrik, I don't know that I would call myself, I wouldn't use those labels, curious or even creative. And yet, as I listen to you speak, I think that those are aspects that are probably more in me than I realize. And so I wouldn't call myself curious, but I love to go and learn from others. And whether it's another church, whether it's a business or an organization, I want to learn from them. And so I suppose that's curiosity, and saying, what can I pick up from them, and then bring it back and adapt it to my context and apply it in my situation. So I suppose I'm being curious when I do that.
You are just a certain kind of curious. You're humbly curious. And that is what we can learn about creativity from the Swedes, actually. You want to hear the story? I don't know if you...
Yeah, I'd love to hear the story. Yeah.
Sorry, because Sweden is one of the most innovative countries on the planet. We're generally ranked number 3. America, of course, is number 1. But Sweden is way up there, and we're just 10 million people. So how can we be so successful? So I met with the Swedish national team of cooking, And by the way, we are not famous for food in Sweden. We are famous for nothing. You have never said to your wife, honey, let's have Swedish tonight. Like, it's not happening. But Sweden has won the Food Olympics multiple times. So how can we win the Food Olympics even though we are not famous for food? And it turns out, because I went and I interviewed the chefs of the Swedish national team. And it turns out that Swedes have this ability to be very confident about our own abilities and at the same time be very humble about not knowing the best. I call it the creative sweet spot, to be humbly confident, which is just what you were earlier. So Swedish chefs are very proud of our own food heritage, but at the same time think everyone else does food better, which creates this ability to both be very proud of what you know, at the same time be very curious about what other people are doing. So to be humbly confident or confidently humble is the perfect sweet spot for creativity.
Interesting. So why is it, Fredrik, that leaders oftentimes are hesitant to learn from others? Because again, if you go back to the definition in Iceland, the word that I won't try to repeat the word itself, but what you learned in Iceland is essentially going around the world, learning from others, bringing it back and applying to what the Viking culture needed.
Yes.
And yet it seems sometimes we're, as leaders, hesitant to want to learn from others, or even talk a little bit about what you learned in China, because I think you use the word copyright, is that, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's obviously learning from others. But sometimes there's a hesitancy to not want to learn from others.
Yeah, the whole idea with this book is actually, why write a book about creativity inspired from countries all over, or people all over the world? It's to get people to be more curious about what people are doing in other parts of the world. I would go so far to say that there's a bug in the human DNA that we are not better at picking up great ideas from others, because there is so many great ideas out there, and we are not picking them up and implementing them. One of the best things, I married a person from a different culture. So I'm Swedish, but my wife is Catholic from the Philippines. And when you marry someone from a different culture, this becomes very apparent for you. Because suddenly when we have children, we have to decide how to parent. Are we going to parent Swedish style or Filipino style? And they are very different parenting styles. If I had just married a Swedish woman, we would not have discussed parenting on the level I have discussed it with my wife. We just do the Swedish way. But now I have to argue for why we should do like a very funny but small but funny example. In the Philippines, when it rains, the kids cannot go out. You get sick. In Sweden, when it snows, we send the kids out. We say, it makes you healthy. Go out and play in the snow. Now, which one are we going to do? Suddenly, we have to argue which way. We can't do both. And if my wife would agree, I guess, you don't get sick in 30-degree rain in the Philippines. Where did we get that from? And she said, okay, kids can go out. It's okay. But another time we will take the best ideas from her. It's very refreshing to have someone give you a different worldview on anything, actually.
So I love that example. And yet that's also, that I'm sure brings with it tension, that brings with it friction and things like that. So is friction and tension part of the curiosity and creative process?
It definitely can be. Sometimes it should be, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Actually, if you're curious and humble, there is no friction. You just, tell me about how you do it, and then let's evaluate what is the best way. There doesn't have to be any friction in that. If it's better, then why not do it?
Yeah. What if now I'm going in a different direction. I'm starting to talk about marriage. I was going to say, what happens when you come to an impasse and you don't agree? Or do you always, I guess if truly in a marriage, you have to somehow come to a compromise.
But marriage is compromise. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Interesting. So talk a little bit about what you did learn in China and this idea of copyright.
Yes. So in the West, I used to live in China for a few years, actually. And in the West, we used to look at China as not creative, not innovative. And we would say all they do is copy. Mm-hmm. But then I met this Chinese lady who said, it's not about copyright, it's about copying right, which is, I think, is brilliant. And back to what you were saying about the definition of an idea. You take two things and you combine them. It means you can't create anything without copying something. Right? Pablo Picasso said, good artists copy, great artists steal. Everyone copies. it doesn't matter, like back to the cooking, right? We are using the ingredients. You can't create any new food without using some old ingredients. The problem with the West is that we look at the Chinese and we look how they copy. And we talk about the Chinese Google and the Chinese Twitter, like they're copies of Google and Twitter. But the Chinese Google and the Chinese Twitter is now way more advanced than Google and Twitter. And Elon Musk is now trying to rebrand Twitter into X and then try to copy the Chinese Twitter for Twitter. I mean, he's copying the copier.
Yeah.
And we should copy more, but we should copy right. And that goes back to the same idea as Iceland and China. Go out, look what everyone, especially like what you guys are doing. This is what you guys are doing. Get people from all around the world to connect and say, how do we build a better church? There is nothing negative. There's only positive. It doesn't mean we should let go of everything that we are doing and suddenly copy everyone else. If what we are doing is better, we should stick to it and we should teach others.
So we hear that all the time. I don't know if you are familiar with American football.
I'm the national champion in American football in Sweden.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So are there American football teams in Sweden then?
They're not that many, which means it's not that hard to be a champion.
But that's good to know.
I love the sport. I know the sport very well.
Well, one of the things that's always said about football, American football, is that it's a copycat league, meaning that if something is working well for one team, that everybody else then will copy it. And the next season, everybody else will be doing the same thing. And that's kind of what you're saying you learned in China, is you look and you see what's working well. And then I guess you could be proud and not copy and keep doing it your own stubborn way. Or you could say, man, here's a better way to do it, and be humble enough to say, let's start doing it that way. But we tend to put a negative spin on that.
Yes, and that's because we think we should just, if like you said, if they just copy what other teams are doing, you're never going to be the champion, right? Isn't that Walt Disney when he was sharing what he was going to do with Disney World, and everyone said, "Aren't you afraid they're going to copy you?" And he said, "Well, I'm not afraid of that. I'm 6 months ahead of them in my vision." So copying right means to look what different organizations are doing, and not just in your industry, in other industries. What is the hotel industry doing right now that we could copy to our church? What is the car industry doing that we could copy? And you take bits and pieces of great best practices and you combine that and you create your own. That's what the Swedish chefs said, actually. We take the best from the food that we learn, and then we take the best of Sweden, and we go to the Food Olympics and we do herring sashimi with lingonberry wasabi. It's like you take the best of everything and you combine it in a unique way that is only unique to you.
I love that.
Don't forget the last part.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's fantastic. And that's a big part of what we do at the summit. And so bringing speakers in like yourself, I know a couple years ago we had Will Gadara from the restaurant world and hospitality, whether it's Horst Schulze and Ritz-Carlton, and it's saying, okay, how can we apply these to different contexts? And best practices are best practices regardless of the organization or the industry. Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, can I just want to give you one more? Because one of the chapters in the book is from Mexico. I went and interviewed, I don't remember his name now, but he's ranked the 50th best chef in the world. He's amazing. But he does Mexican food. So I said, Mexican food is, very simple. How can you become the most innovative chef if you're doing Mexican food? And he said the trick is to do it familiarly surprising. He said, if I take Mexican food and I do it just like everyone else, it's very familiar, but it's not innovative. So, but if I do it very differently, and you don't recognize any of the textures or the taste of Mexican food, people are not going to like it because they want familiarity. Food is very much emotions and memories. So that, like, he would take a cactus that people normally use for a soup, but he would turn it into an ice cream. So that people recognize the taste, but they're surprised by the texture. So I think I like that. Surprisingly familiar is the sweet spot we should aim for.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. So what are some inhibitors to creativity in organizations? What are things that keep us from being creative?
It depends, actually. If you ask, I've interviewed, I asked that question to hundreds of thousands of people, and there's not one answer. It's very individual. For some, it's fear, uncertainty. For others, for me, for example, it's bureaucracy. Too many rules and too much bureaucracy just kills my creativity. It just strangles me.
Yeah. So if you were an organizational leader, you would say be careful of bureaucracy because it's gonna strangle the
I
organization.
would say, I think that's one of the things that organizations could really, if you want to improve innovation culture in a company, you can look at which of the rules can we. I heard about a bank in Singapore. They had rules for how long the socks should be of their employees.
Is
Like,
that right?
why on earth?
Wow.
That doesn't make banking better in any way. You can have one rule: we dress professionally. That's all you have to say. You
Yeah.
don't need lengths of sock rules. If people are trying so desperately to follow all these rules, when are they going to be creative? So yes, we can definitely reduce a lot of rules and a lot of admin, which like now with automation, we like getting people to fill out their receipts and all that. You can automate a lot of that, and that the time we save on that, which kills our souls, we can use for more innovative and more productive things.
And is there an environment that causes creativity to grow more than any? I know you talk about leaders needing to inspire their people, model it for them, but what is the kind of environment that just produces the most creativity?
Again, very individual, but if you should summarize it, it's well, it's the where you are extremely relaxed. When you're
Okay.
like, well, meditation, for example, or
Okay.
if you look at when people have great ideas that will come in meditation, in sleep, when you're walking in a forest, like those are the best ideas of mankind has come in those situations. So does that mean you should now let your employees meditate on during work time? Actually, yes, I say yes, definitely. A lot of people have their best ideas on the toilet. I mean, it's just a fact. If your best employee has his or her best ideas on the toilet, give that person his personal toilet. I mean, I would go that far. But that doesn't mean everyone needs a personal toilet, right? But
Right.
but then on the other hand, some people need pressure. Some people need deadlines. They say, nothing happens until you pressure me. So there's no right answer. The answer, though, here's the good advice. I interviewed a guy who used to work for Samsung, and he said there's so much focus on individual creative process. But what about the collective ideation process? Never start a new group of a work group without having the first meeting and everyone describe their creative process to everyone else. Hi, I would, for example, if you and I started in a new group, I would say, hi, I'm Fredrik. I love ideas. I have a lot of ideas, but I'm an introvert, which means in meetings, maybe I will look angry or bored. I am not. I love being here. I love coming up with ideas with you guys. It's just I'm uncomfortable in groups like this. I usually have my best ideas by myself. So ignore me if I am not angry at you. Now you know. Otherwise, or another person might say, I have my best ideas when we brainstorm together. So let's have, who are with me? Who would like to brainstorm with me? Now you understand each other's creative processes, both individual and in group, from a group perspective. And I promise you, the group is going to innovate on a different level.
Interesting. So do you actually, Fredrik, advise organizations, churches, companies to schedule into the weekly rhythm time to innovate, time to be creative, or does it happen more haphazardly, or can you schedule that?
Well, some people
Depends on how people.
some people
Yeah.
should schedule it because that's how it
Yeah.
works for them. Most people should not schedule it. My advice is for organizations to sit down and fully understand their own organization's creative DNA. Because, for example, IKEA has a very different creative DNA than, for example, Ericsson, which are both Swedish companies, but they're totally different. One is engineer-driven, big scale processes. The other one is question everything, make it cheaper. Like if you work in IKEA and you switch to Ericsson, you're going to last a month. But every organization, every church, every company has an innovation DNA. And if you identify it, say, what are we good at? How do we innovate the best as a group? And then you emphasize, it's like a plant. Now you fertilize that and you give it everything, then it will start to grow.
So going back to your example of IKEA and Ericsson, so is the process at IKEA to question everything? You kind of said that. And Ericsson, is it to create processes? Was that how you would
Yeah,
describe
the
your
big industrial processes that builds the GSM network and things like that. It's the work
Okay.
is always up. It never fails. Government can buy this and depend on it. That's the DNA of Ericsson. It's slow,
Okay.
but it's slow innovation. It's like a
But you can
tanker
count
versus,
on it.
it's
Yeah.
like a truck. It's like a tanker versus a sports car. It's different.
Yeah, that's good. So I feel like sometimes, Fredrik, when I'm in a group of, so let's say our staff at LCBC, the church that I was a leader at for 30 some years, we had a staff of around 300 people. Oftentimes 20-year-olds, 20-somethings would want us to be creative. And I felt like sometimes their creative ideas or what they were almost asking for could put the entire organization at risk. And so I would say no to those ideas. And then they would come back and say, oh, well, we never innovate. We're never creative here. And I'm like, yeah, we can be creative, but we don't have to put the organization at risk in the process. So are there levels of creativity that way?
The beauty of youth, right? But that's your role, isn't it? I mean, if we don't want leaders should not just accept all ideas. Most ideas that people come up with are actually not good, and we don't have endless resources. So as a job as a leader, it's like to raise the bar just so high so that it's really hard to get over it. But if it's too hard to get over it, then people just stop innovating. If no ideas get innovated, they never feel listened to, then they will just stop. Because those 20-year-olds, all they needed to hear was that you listen to them.
Yeah.
You don't need to take every idea, but they need to feel that when I have a good idea, they are going to make that one. And you are allowed to come up with good ideas. And then you have to explain to them, sorry, this one, not that the timing is not right, or whatever the reason is.
I very much appreciate, Fredrik, you're saying that as leaders, it's not only do we have permission to say no to ideas, it's some of our responsibility to do that, because nobody else is going to see the overall good of the organization probably as well as the leadership of the organization. So does age play any part in creativity, or is it, do you really see it excelling all throughout the ages?
I think it becomes harder. I guess it's like exercise. The older you are, the more effort you need to put in order to build muscle. And creativity in a way is a muscle.
Yeah.
So we might have to, but also, if you have a young mind, some people have, right? You meet these people and they say, wow, this guy feels 20 years younger. It's very much of a mindset.
Yeah, that's good.
I was at an event yesterday and I met an investor who's investing in AI companies, and he had just invested in a new AI company, and the guy was 57-year-old who started it. So it's about the mindset.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think in your book as well, you actually interviewed an 84-year-old, was he from Mongolia, I believe? Yeah. And so, I mean, that shows, and you were describing him as being very creative. So obviously age wasn't a limiter for him.
He was wise, actually. I wouldn't call him creative, I would call him wise.
Okay.
But there's another example in the book from the Maldives about the leader, and he talks. He's a head of a resort in the Maldives, and he travels around the world to pick up new ideas in hospitality. But he talked about creative respiration versus inspiration. And as you know, the word inspiration actually means to breathe in, right? To inspire, to perspire, so breathe out. So inspiration means to breathe in. So inspiration is like creative oxygen to our imagination. But respiration is what the body does with the oxygen, when the lungs take in the oxygen and puts it to use. So creative respiration is more than just inspiring people. So he would go around the world and pick up nice trends, but then he would curate which of these things that he saw that he would send on to his people. Because he said, if I send all these ideas to my people, I'm overloading them with so many ideas and what they could be doing, and they get overwhelmed, and they feel stressed because there's no way we can do all of this. So he said, creative respiration is for me as a leader to identify how to inspire someone in the right amount in a way that makes them inspired to act, to do something. not just feel happy and feel full of enjoyment and energy, but actually inspiration that turns into action. That's what we want.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So one more question from your new book, Fredrik. Were you surprised at any country that you visited that they were as creative as there were? Are there any that stick out to you that go, man, I never thought that?
Well, obviously North Korea. I didn't think, I went to North Korea because everyone told me, and I also said, North Korea is the least creative country on the planet. And the only reason I went to North Korea, and I've been twice, was because I wanted to study the least creative country on the planet. But when I got there, and it is in many ways the least creative country on the planet, but I never thought I was going to gain an insight into creativity in North Korea, but I actually did. But I have to put in a disclaimer. Every time I talk about North Korea, this is the insight is beautiful. That is in no way saying I agree with the politics of North Korea. I just always have to say that.
Yeah,
but you can learn something from a culture, regardless of what the political landscape is like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's fascinating that even in that what seems like a very constraining culture, the people are able still to be creative and find ways to create even in the midst of that.
North Korea, they have to be creative to stay alive, unfortunately. So that's but that's from a different perspective. But the culture of, I like to say that Taylor Swift, just to make it a little bit more positive and more relatable to us. Taylor Swift, when she gave away $100,000, was it $100,000 or $10,000? I think it was $100,000 to every tax driver. Maybe it was 10,000. Anyway, she gave away a lot of money to the truck drivers on her Eras tour. Why? Because she knew without the truck drivers, no Taylor Swift, right? But we tend to glorify the creative genius on stage. But that doesn't happen without everyone else working behind the scenes. It's the same in a church, right?
Yeah.
It's everyone working together to create that whatever we are creating. And the ones that doesn't get recognitions, they should really, if one thing leaders can do it to make sure that the people who never get recognized for the work that they do.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Well, Fredrik, it's fun talking with you and just hearing what you're learning. I'm fascinated of, again, your travels and your studies, and so applicable to us as leaders. And again, one of the things, as you talked about creating space or giving space, and even people oftentimes being most creative when they're relaxed, and you use the example of toilet. For me, it's not the toilet. Oftentimes it's the shower. Oftentimes it's mowing grass. But as I think about it, that's when I'm relaxed. And as a employer, sometimes I feel like, oh, that's not productive time if the employees are that relaxed. They ought to be tense. They ought to be working hard. They ought to be productive. And yet the reality is if I'm not giving them space to be relaxed, they're not going to be as efficient and effective as they could be.
Yeah, that is actually very true. I interviewed a sculptor in Hong Kong, and he would, after listening to him, I felt that the English language has a deficit when it comes to creativity, because we talk about ideas as one thing. But like, I'm going to send an invoice now. That kind of idea is totally different from like a J.K. Rowling coming up with Harry Potter. And we called both of them ideas. Yeah. He would call it mortal ideas and divine ideas. Mortal ideas is what your conscious brain comes up with. What am I going to make for dinner? That's a conscious idea. Or how do we solve this problem with HR? It's a conscious idea. But a divine idea is an idea that comes to you from somewhere. And those ideas are always the best. Throughout human history, those are the best. And they come when we are so relaxed. And he would do conscious meditation, and to put himself in a state where he can get these divine ideas delivered to him.
Yeah,
and we should do that more. We should give our people time to do that more.
Well, and to your point, as when we started this, Fredrik, it's part of being creative in a business environment, church environment. It's to solve problems, to be more effective. And so who wouldn't want that as a boss, as a leader? And they're all tension points in our organizations. And so if we can alleviate those and be better, then, man, who doesn't want that? So, yeah. Fredrik, thank you. It's wonderful talking to you. It's fun having you be a part of the Global Leadership Network family. We always say that of speakers that have been at the summit. And so appreciate what you're doing and appreciate with you spending time with us today.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Good. Thank you, Fredrik. We'll talk to you soon.
Of course.
Okay, guys, one thing that really stuck with me from this conversation is the idea that creativity often shows up when we're relaxed. That's so counterintuitive, isn't it? We tend to think creativity comes from working harder. That's what David even mentioned in the conversation. But often it comes when we create space, when we slow down enough to actually think. I also loved the reminder that everyone's creative lane looks different. Some people need quiet, some people need movement, some need collaboration. Great leaders learn those lanes and build environments where creativity can actually thrive. So here's a simple takeaway that you can do today. Ask those around you, what helps you feel relaxed enough to be creative? You can ask this to a family member. You could also ask this to a coworker. That question alone can light people up. Plus, it could make for a really fun conversation to learn where other people get their best ideas. Okay. Thanks for being here, and a big thanks to our donors that allow for this podcast to happen. Our monthly giving community, Summit Champions, ensure that good leadership content is easy to access because we really do believe everyone is designed to lead right where they are. And if this episode encouraged you, don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen. And remember, you have influence, so don't be afraid to creatively lead right where you are.